and welcome to the programme. I'm Nima Abouarde. The tragic attack in which dozens of workers were killed when militant Islamists targeted a gas plant in Algeria last month has highlighted the vulnerability of companies operating in these isolated areas. Now, oil and gas account for 70% of Algeria's output, so will what happened in the Sahara hurt this crucial sector?
Well, this is clearly a very serious incident, and I think is a game changer for the industry, not only across the Maghreb, but more broadly.
Also coming up this week, religious returns. Can Islamic finance be the way forward for Tunisia's economy? Grocery gamble. Do new regulations spell the end of the community store in Abu Dhabi? Adding up, Twitter starts marketing to its users in the region, but will they like it? And why these scarves are bridging cultures and building a business. But first, militant Islamists hit the heart of the Algerian economy when they targeted the In Amenas gas plant in the Sahara last month. Oil and gas is central to Algeria's economy. The country is Europe's third largest gas supplier, and many firms have been scaling back operations since the attack. So will this tragic incident hurt the economy in the long run? Simon Atkinson takes a look.
The aftermath of last month's attack. Almost 50 people died here, the bulk of them non-Algerians employed by international firms. And it's those companies and the profits they share with the government that have helped create a steady economy. Last year, Algeria's GDP grew by 2.4%. That was heavily driven by an average of 1.8 million barrels of oil it produces each day. After its brutal civil war of the 1990s, Algeria's appeal to investors has been helped by some political stability. At the same time as Arab uprisings were beginning, Algeria had these riots over food prices, but they soon fizzled out.
It didn't have that same level of unrest as Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, all of its neighbours, and that will be a key positive from an investor perspective. On the other hand, they haven't really done anything to improve what is a difficult and erratic business environment, which companies sometimes struggle with in Algeria.
Of course, the In Amenas incident is likely to make keeping and attracting foreign money even harder. Since then, parallels have been drawn with southern Iraq, where oil revenue drives the economy, but where international oil companies are still prepared to operate and try to reduce security risks. And this safety expert says firms wanting to stay in Algeria need to learn from those examples.
What we saw in Algeria is a real departure. No oil field ever has been overrun quite like this. So this is a concern. But if you look at the protection of the oil fields in Iraq, they look very different to oil fields in remote corners in Algeria. So if people want to invest in Algeria, and they should, and they can, but they will now have to consider that there is a different form of threat, which needs a different form of control.
It's not just about Algeria. In neighbouring Libya, there's growing concern that a similar attack may be on the horizon. And while analysts say few firms are likely to permanently pull out of either country, the financial implications can't be ignored.
A lot of the costs associated with producing oil in Iraq is security costs, because the companies have to have private security around their installations. And I think if you see that extending to other oil producing countries that were deemed a bit more stable, it's going to have a knock-on impact down the chain. And if it slows investment, then of course it's also bad for the economies of the producing countries and the potential for more trouble. It's a catch-22 situation.
On the streets of the capital, many Algerians have more immediate worries: unemployment, price of food, a general failure to share in the country's comparative wealth. But the long-term fallout of events hundreds of miles away in the Sahara can only add to those concerns.
Simon Atkinson reporting there. Now, Tunisia's revolution brought about political change and also marked the start of a new economic future. Now, Islamic finance has been touted as a possible way for banks and businesses in Tunisia to raise much-needed cash. But can it compete with conventional banking? Jeremy Howell reports from Tunisia.
Running low on capital and carrying large loads of bad debt. That's the plight of most banks in Tunisia. But the Islamic bank Zitouna, founded only 3 years ago, has come into the sector with fresh cash. It has capital reserves of $400 million and is targeting loans to start-up companies, which conventional banks are generally reluctant to lend to.
Zitouna
is targeting different types of business, including microfinance. It's important for the bank to focus on that. We're planning to establish a dedicated company to provide services and products for those sectors in society which might not be able to get support from other banks, especially when those banks impose so many conditions on their loans and ask for so many guarantees.
At the headquarters of the Central Bank of Tunisia, I met its governor, Chetli Ayari, and asked him first what steps he's taking to strengthen the conventional banking sector.
We are trying now to make the sector more exposed to competition. Regarding the non-performing loans or the bad loans, whatever, we are going to establish a company called the Asset Management Company to take care of these bad debts and to sell them back to the markets. So by that way we will be alleviating all these bad debts from the balance sheet of the banks. But before that, the banks should agree that a haircut should be accepted. That's, for instance, a bad debt which values 100 should be sold to us at, say, 20 or 30.
The government is quite keen to develop Islamic banking in Tunisia. In what way might Islamic banking provide extra credit lines to businesses?
The Islamic financing, banking or market, whatever, will bring new things to the new capital, new resources. We have not any experience yet. Of course, we have the Zitouna, but it's a very small experience. The Islamic financing will be more important in, let's say, the year to come or the two coming years.
Some people suggest that the government is keen on developing Islamic banking for one particular reason, so that it can sell Sukuk's Islamic bonds to rich Gulf nations and to bolster public finances that way.
That's correct. We will be launching our first Sukuk, about 1 billion dinars, which is about $600 million. Many Gulf banks are ready to help us. Today, if you want to get money from the Gulf countries, I think you have to pass through the Islamic financing business.
Do you think that Islamic banking will in fact be more important for bolstering public finances in the future than helping the small and medium-sized enterprises get access to credit?
In future, I'm sure that the Islamic banking will be very active in the private sector in Tunisia. I'm sure of that. But for the next 2 or 3 years, probably the government will be more exposed to that kind of cooperation than the private sector, yes.
Tunisia's central bank governor speaking to Jeremy Howell there. Now, unlike the big malls that dominate Dubai, neighbouring Abu Dhabi has more than 1,000 small grocery shops on its streets. But new regulations mean that the community shop could be under threat. Jonathan Florian has this report from the capital.
Welcome to the Tankamai district of Abu Dhabi, where within about a square kilometre you'll find more than 20 groceries like this one who've shut up shop as they come to terms with new legislation brought in by the food authorities here on the 1st of January.
This shop is undergoing renovation, but not all will reopen, as many grocers can't afford the changes or have too little space to be granted a licence. The government wants a more uniform look to groceries that it thinks were stuck in the 1970s, as well as a health and safety upgrade. Hundreds of stores are estimated to have closed across the capital, and many residents are complaining.
We're so dependent on the grocery stores because it was just under our building, and we actually we used to call them and they used to go up for us in like 2 minutes. Our order was available for us.
We have a lot of problems, need to go so far, and then everywhere we don't have a big supermarket, we don't have a car, we are all 4 people here, but we go so far and then need to pay for taxi.
If we need any telephone cards, we have to go very far from here. This area, there is no any supermarket. No, there are so many groceries around this area, but all the groceries are closed.
Suleiman has closed his shop, but is looking to use his savings and borrow from friends and a bank to pay the $25,000 needed to bring his shop up to scratch.
They want to change the roof and the mizan and the roof and the what is called mizan, then roll all shelves, good shelves, and a good view. They want a good view as a standard.
You can see the storage, which is clearly
separated for each kind of food.
The Abu Dhabi Food Control Authority gave more than a year's notice of the changes and has come up with a shop livery that all independent bakala or groceries in the city can use to spruce themselves up. So what's the big idea?
The changes basically are, first of all, the standards of food safety, hygiene, if we can summarize them, and also the changes of the visual one and the space area, taking in mind the comfortability of the consumer when he's entering the shop. Also having those different machines, different things that are, related with the new standards and different standards of food safety.
Mohammed has run his shop for years and years and was one of the first grocers to upgrade. He's found the changes to be beneficial.
At first, I was a bit skeptical, but then people from the Food Control Authority explained everything to me and I decided to go for the changes. It has been good since then. My sales have shot up by around 45% and customers are happy.
And some of the big chains running convenience stores around the UAE also see the new rules as a business opportunity for them, which might also help shopkeepers struggling to find the money to modernise.
Our business plan for this year is to open another 40 to 50 locations across the UAE, which we expect half of this portfolio to be in Abu Dhabi. The new regulation, and we knew this was coming for the last 6 months, provides us with a faster rollout in Abu Dhabi, as opposed to finding a lot of greenfield locations, a lot of new locations. There's an opportunity for us to go and see some of these locations that can't afford to refurbish, where we can come in, assist, partner up, franchise, and sort of provide us with a portfolio, a pipeline of locations.
Observers say the Abu Dhabi grocery market was saturated, and those shops which remain seem likely to benefit from the reduced competition and their new look. But for the moment at least, many customers will remain inconvenienced, as it will take time for the new shops to open. And some are likely to stay closed forever, their owners having already decided to pack up and return to their home country.
Jonathan Fruin reporting there. Right, we're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, ahead for business, we go to Turkey to meet a woman with some new ideas. Welcome back to the programme. I'm Nima Abouarte. As governments fell in Tunisia and Egypt, events were dubbed by some as a Twitter revolution because of the important role that social media played at the height of protests. With 200 million Twitter users globally and the number of users in the Middle East trebling in the past year, this week the company began trying to make money from that growth by letting companies pay to put adverts on people's Twitter feeds. So with the last few years being instrumental in terms of political change in this region and those changes reflected on Twitter, how has that impacted the way it's done business here? That's a question that Katie Watson put to Shailesh Rao, Twitter's Vice President of International Revenue.
Twitter tends to be used as a platform for open conversation when there are significant events happening in the real world. Obviously, there have been tremendous changes, tremendous activity in the Middle East region, and not surprisingly, Twitter's been a platform for conversation about what people are seeing and observing, how they're feeling, and what they think about the events happening around them in the region. What we like to believe is that Twitter provides a voice to anyone who can use the service to communicate what they think, what they're interested in, and it allows people to connect with their interests in a seamless and easy way.
Twitter's very well known for its freedom of expression and people being able to tweet what they like, but it also can be controversial, especially in this region. There are governments, for example, in Kuwait and Qatar, who have imprisoned people for their tweets. So how do you deal with that when it comes to working in this region?
Well, our goal is to provide the service so that any user can express what they want. But of course, we want those forms of expression to be consistent with the laws of the various countries around the world.
Do you get into trouble, or do you ever come under pressure from governments who are concerned with what's going on?
Well, our job is to continue to engage all stakeholders in the process of understanding what our platform does, how it works, what our terms and conditions are, and to make sure that we defend the voice of our users. And that's what we do around the world.
Do governments get involved, or do they get in touch with you to talk to you about kind of their
Well, of
concerns?
course, I mean, governments are a key stakeholder in that conversation, and it's our job to be engaged and listen and to provide information and clarify. Anytime you have a new technology or a new service, it's incumbent on the provider of that service to be available to provide information, clarification, and educate. And we spend a lot of time with government stakeholders and other organizations around the world, making sure that we can provide the information necessary to understand the way the service works.
What do you say to critics who don't want to engage with brands, they want to engage with fellow users and they don't want any advertising?
Don't engage with those tweets. Just like anybody else, a promoted tweet is the same like any other tweet. It includes content information that in this case comes from a brand. If a user is not interested in that tweet, they don't have to engage with that tweet. The good thing for the brand is that they only pay for tweets that users engage with, which means they click on it, they favorite it, they retweet it, they reply to it. So we're really holding ourselves to a standard, which is that if the tweet is interesting to the user, they will engage with it, otherwise we don't get paid. And we like that kind of incentive because it encourages us and the brand to make sure that the content's relevant to the user.
Twitter's Shailesh Rao speaking to Katie Watson there. Now let's see what other stories have been making business headlines across the region this week. Kuwait has moved a step closer to writing off debts owed by its people. The Finance and Economic Committee voted in favour of scrapping interest on loans taken out by Kuwaitis between January 2002 and April 2008. The proposal to write off interest payments is opposed by the government, which has to approve bills passed by Parliament before they become law. Dubai's government-run oil company Enoch says it's seeking oil supplies from Qatar to replace imports from Iran. US sanctions threaten financial penalties for companies that trade with the country. And Iran has said it's banning all crude oil and gas exports to the European Union, despite the fact that the 27-member bloc has already imposed its own boycott. Before the EU imposed sanctions last year, exports there represented about 18% of Iran's oil sales. Now, the headscarf is a symbol with important religious and cultural significance here in this region, but one Turkish designer wants to widen its appeal and make it a high-end fashion item. So we went to Istanbul to meet the woman who says that bridging cultures is what her label is all about.
I'm Zemra Akarli. My background, both parents are Turkish, but at the same time I grew up in Germany. I carry both identities. I wanted to create a label where I built bridges between Orient and Occident. I came to Istanbul with the imagination that I will find handcrafted, beautiful pieces, anything just around any corner, but it wasn't like that. What I found was a lot of bad quality fabrics, and I was a little bit disappointed at the beginning, and I was thinking, well, I need handcraft, I need needlework. Where is it? So I was asking people and they said, well, you have to go to the more eastern part of Turkey. So one day I was observing a construction worker and he had this mustache, and I really picture a true Anatolian man with this mustache. And I said, of course, they are in Istanbul to make a better living. I have to find their wives, their daughters. And then I took all my courage to walk up to one man. The first man smiled at me and said, oh wow, that's a great idea. Let me call my wife and ask her if she's home. I can invite you and she can show you her needlework. And I said yes. Today I came here to Nazlı. Nazlı is the first Zemzem lady. I started my first collection with 8 ladies, and now we're 65. Hey, merhaba. Every Zemzem lady has to have her own bank account. That was the only thing that took me a while, because I have to negotiate with their husbands to allow it. That was for them a huge thing. Like, why should she have her own bank account? They didn't really understand. But I did well, and I managed it, and it makes sense. Not just working for Zemzem, like working, contributing something to society, to a project. Not just earning their own money, they have their own bank account.
I never worked before. I never earned my own money. So it's a really positive thing. But the best thing was the first time I could buy my husband a birthday present. Before, I had to ask him for money to buy the present.
Creating a label in 3 years would not be possible in Europe. The European mentality, they don't take risks. You know, they think about in detail if something, a project or an idea. And in Istanbul, they're taking more risks because it's like they like to be entrepreneurs. They're used to that. They open one store, and if it doesn't work, they start something new. Like for here to come up with the idea, I could get people doing it. The way you do business is in Europe different than in Turkey. As a new label, getting into a top store is a lot of work. So once I have the order, I have to deliver just in time. So the client, of course, says, well, the concept of the brand is great, the products are great, the philosophy is great, so let's order. So for me as a young label, that's a big chance. So then I come back to Istanbul, and then I have to, of course, start the production. And I have a deadline due to the fact that they really take it a little bit easy. And for me being anxious about not delivering just in time, that sometimes really was a challenge. My goal and my aim at the beginning, of course, was to establish my brand in Europe. But now the focus is the North and Middle East, definitely. That's my next goal, and North America.
Right, that's all from us for this week. I do hope you've enjoyed our programme. Before we go, let's see how the region's main markets performed. And remember, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is middleeastbiz@bbc.co.uk, and you can go to Twitter and Facebook for latest photos and news from our teams across the world. Now, next week we're in Egypt. With unstable politics and a fragile economy, it's a hard sell as a place to invest, but we'll be going to one part of the country that's managed to lure international firms to set up operations and create much needed jobs. Until then, from me, Nima Abuarte, and the rest of the team, thank you for watching. Bye bye.